Hello, screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Function or method. Okay, today's topic. So in Java, we call it a method. We don't call it function. But in C, C++, we call it function. Okay, because function is independent. We already have discussed this, and method is dependent on class. So to access a method of a class, there are two ways. The first way is to create object of that class, and with the help of that object reference, access the properties. The second way is to declare static methods and call them directly with the class name. Okay, so function method. What is a function or method? So a method or function is a block of statements which perform some specific task. Okay, function or a method. Okay, it is a block of statements. Block means the curly braces. It is statements. A method is a block of statements, or you can also say statement one, statement n. So a function is a block of statements. So we have multiple statements here. You can have a single statement also. It is not mandatory to have multiple statements, but a function is a this is the block. Why do we write block whenever we have multiple statements? So to group them, we write blocks. So a method or a function is a block of statements which performs some specific task. So every function or method we define to perform specific task. Suppose let's an example Microsoft Office Excel. So in Microsoft Office Excel, we have so many functions like if, sum, max, mean. So every function performs specific task. Sum performs specific task, and max or mean, today, now, every individual function performs specific task. Okay, so here also a function or method is a block of statements which perform specific task. Okay, every block has a specific name called function or method name. As this is the block, so every block has a name, unique name, has a specific name, or has a unique name, specific, or you can also say unique name called function name. So every block has a unique name called function name. A function may pick some data, perform its tasks. So the data we can provide through its parameter area, parameter or argument area. So a function may need some data. Function may need some data or it may not need any data to perform its task. So suppose this is a sum function. So a sum function may need some data that it will sum, it will return you the sum. So a function may need some data to perform its task. So the data we can provide through its parameter or argument area. Here is the area. It can accept multiple as a parameter or argument. It can accept multiple data as parameters or arguments. So inside a function or method, you can pass multiple parameters, or you can also say arguments, or you can also say values. Okay. Now, a function may return some data after performing the operation. A function may return some data after performing its operation. Okay. So we have to mention the type of data the specific function or method returns before its name, called return type of the function or method. So a function may return some data after performing the operation. Suppose this is a method or a function or a method, whatever it is. Okay. So a method may return some data after processing everything. So we have to mention the type of data the specific method returns. If this method returns integer value, so you have to mention the type of data before its name here, return type, called return type of the method. This is the method's return type, which specifies that what type of data this method can return. But it does not mean that this method has to return a value. This method may not return a value. If a method is not returning anything, then we have to mention void. Okay. We have to mention void in its return type. If a method is not returning anything, if this method is returning nothing, then here you have to write void. Okay, here you have to write void. But if a method is returning something, then here you have to mention the type of data the specific method returns. Type means in any programming language, whenever you hear the word type, so always remember type means data type. In any programming language, this type word means data type. Doesn't matter what the programming language is, whether it is C, C++, or Java, or any programming language, type means data type. So this is the basic functions or methods definition. Okay. Now let's say an example. Int sum. Suppose we are creating a method named sum, which will return integer type of value. Okay. So if we mention any return type, then it is not mandatory to return data. But if we return any data, then it is mandatory to return the same type of data which we have mentioned in the return type. Suppose this method is returning nothing. So we will just write void print, and here we are not passing anything here. Okay. So system.out.println. Hello world. So if you want to print hello world, you just have to call this print method, and this print method is returning nothing. That's why we have written here void in the return type. Okay, if a method is returning nothing, we are not using the return reserve keyword inside the method. We are returning nothing from this method. So you have to write void. But suppose if a method is returning something. Okay, so if we mention any return type, if you are mentioning any return type, then it is not mandatory to return data. You may not return some data. You may not return any data from the method where you have mentioned any specific return type. When you mention any return type, it means either you don't return anything, or if you are returning something, then you can only return this type of data. Always remember this. If we are mentioning some return type here, int, float, char, double, or any class name, okay, so you may not return some data. It is okay. But if you want to return any data, you have to return same type of data, what you have mentioned here. So if we are writing void, it means we are returning nothing. If you write void here, you can return nothing. You cannot return any data. Okay, but suppose if we are writing int here, still it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory to return. If you are writing something here in the return type, it is not mandatory to return that type of data. But you may not return some data, or if you want to return, then you have to return this type of data. So in this method, we are returning nothing. Still, it is okay. We have written int here. It does not mean that you always have to return integer data type. You may not return data, but if you want to return data, you can only return int. Suppose it is also okay. But if you are writing int here and returning float value, then it is incorrect. Syntactically incorrect, grammatically incorrect. It is wrong, compilation error. Okay. So this is the basic definition of a method. So is this method topic clear to everyone, that what is a method? What is a method name, parameter list, argument list, return type, statements? Now we have to understand how to call and how a method works. Okay, let's say an example. onlinegdb.com. Class test. Okay, void hello system dot out dot println hello world. Okay, void mm, void or int whatever you want. Int sum, int num1 comma int num2. Okay. We are calling hello method, and now we are returning num1 plus num2. Okay. Sorry, control C. It is Java. So we have created a class test. Inside this test class, we have two methods. One is void hello, and another is int sum. And sum method is taking two parameters. And what type of parameters it is taking? It is taking the first parameter as an integer and second parameter also as an integer. Okay. Now, when we call sum method, so we do have to pass some data here. Suppose sum 5 comma 11. Okay, just run it. Oh, sorry. Test t equal to new test and t dot sum. Okay. So the object reference we have to call the properties. See, hello world and 16. So how this output we are getting? See, any program's execution starts with main. Okay. So inside main, we are creating object of test class. And this t is the reference, which is referring to that object, which is pointing to that object. Okay. Now this t is we are using to call this test class methods. So which method we are calling? Sum method. So t dot sum 5 and 11 we are passing. So this 5 is getting stored into this num1, and this 11 is getting stored into this num2 variable. Okay, it means now this num1 has 5 and num2 has 11. Inside this sum method, it is calling hello. So to call hello, we don't have to create object, because this sum method is in test class and hello method is also in test class. So if two or more methods are there in a same class, so to call a method from the same class, you don't need to create any object. Okay, you can also create object, but it is not mandatory. So we are calling directly hello here. So it is calling hello at first. Inside hello, it is printing hello world. It means execution of this method is completed. Now it will return to the statement where it was called from. So it was called from this statement. So the calling of this hello method is completed. It means it has done every work. So after this, it will return to again that specific statement. Now this is completed. Again, return 5 plus 11, 16. So it is returning 16. 16 is what type of data? Int. It means this method is okay. So we are returning 16. Okay. So whom it will return 16, from where it was called. So it was called from here. So here it will return 16. So system.out.println 16. 16 is printed here. Now everyone tell me, like, is there any problem, or it is clear, like how we are calling and how a function works? What is the function name? What is the parameter list? What is the return type? Is everything clear, or do you have any doubt? Tell me. Divin, Niveda, Vamsi, any problem?
No doubt, sir.
No way, sir.
Okay. So this is what a method is. Now let's come to the topic, method overloading. If we have more than one method with the same name, it is called method overloading. If we have more than one method with the same name, in the same class, so it is called method overloading. If we have more than one method with the same name, doesn't matter what type of return type is this, but with the same name only. Suppose if we have void sum, float num1 comma float num2, system dot out dot println num1 plus num2. It means when we call some method, which method will work? So it will depend on the type of data we are passing here. So we are passing integer, integer. So integer, integer. This sum will be called. Now if we are passing float, float, this method will be called t dot sum. Void type, oh sorry, void yes, it is not returning anything. So we have t object reference t dot sum. We are passing float, float. So this method will be called, and we are passing int, int. This method will be called. So it is returning something. That is why we have printed this, but you cannot print this because it is not returning anything. Okay. See 17.1. Create another method. Void sum int num1 comma float num2. Again we have some method. See 16.5. So when we are passing int, int, so this sum is working. When we are passing float, 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 this sum is working. When we are passing int float, this sum is working. And when we are passing three integer values, this sum is working. 25, 25, 11, 26, 36. See, 36. So we have multiple methods with the same name. It is called method overloading. Okay. Method overloading related to calling the method. Doesn't matter what return type you have. Method overloading has no any relation with the method's return type. It has only relation with the method name and the parameter list. You cannot have doesn't matter what you have inside the method's body. Method overloading is only related to calling the method. To call a method, the only thing which is required is the method name and the number of parameters. So the method name and number of parameters are same. Type of parameters are also same. It means there is an error, compilation error. This will not work because it has two methods with the same signature. So which method it will call? When we are calling here with integer and float, so will it call this or it will call this? So it is getting confused. So which method to call? Because you have everything same. Only name can be same. But if you have everything same, it will not work. Which method it will call? You have to have some difference in parameter list. Either you have to have different number of parameters or you have to have different type of parameters. Suppose two names are same, but we have different types of parameters like int, float, int float. So it is not getting confused. When you are passing int, it will calling this. When you are passing float, it is calling this. When you are passing int float, it is calling this. So there is no any confusion, no any problem with calling the sum method. But when you have exact same thing, then it will be a problem. Doesn't matter return type, you have different return type, still it will be a problem. If you have int here and you will say, see, we have some difference, but difference will not be in the return type because the problem is at the time of calling the method. So when you call the method, only method name and parameter matters. Return type does not matter. Return type, when does it matter? After the execution of all the statements of the method. Then what type of data you are returning from this method? Returning from this method. If this is true, this is correct, then you can enter into the method. After entering into the method, this return type matters. But at the time of calling the method, only method name and number of parameters and type of parameters matters. So if you have more than one method with the same name only, it is called method overloading. But if you have multiple methods with the same name, so which method it will call? It will call the method according to the number of data types at first. Suppose if number of data types are same, here we have two data types, two parameters. Here also we have two parameters. Both are same. But again, it will be a problem that which method to call. So we have differentiated both the methods with number of parameters are same, but type of parameters are different. Here we have two parameters. Here also we have two parameters. Here also we have two parameters, but type of parameters are different, like int, float, int float. So when you pass int float, this method will be called. When you pass float, this method will be called. When you pass int, this method will be called. That's all. Method is completed. Method overloading is also completed. Now you tell me, everyone tell me, is there any problem with method overloading or anything? Tell me, any problem? Method overloading completed. Tell me if you have any problem or not. Then we can continue to the next topic. But now you have to practice this thing yourself to understand it better, like how to call it, which method to call, how you can call a method of a class, either by creating the object of that class and or the class name itself, but if the method is static. If the method is static, you can call it with object also and with directly the class name also. Today's class is over. Now the next topic is recursion. And recursion is like, you have to understand it more clearly, because data structure topic is like, data structure depends on recursion. In data structure, every time we will use recursion. Recursion is also a method. Okay. So tomorrow we will discuss constructor and recursion. Recursion and constructor, then constructor. That's all for today. Is there any problem? Divin, Niveda, Vamsi, Sweta,
No,
Dhanasri?
sir.
So we have completed what
No.
a function or method is and how to call it and what is method overloading. Okay. In total 15 class, I guess, as today it was 7th class, day 7. So I think in total 15, 16 classes total. Next, like 9 to 10 classes, we will complete core Java part. Then we will start working with data structures. Okay. So that's all for today. Let's connect tomorrow. I'm sharing you the file and link. Okay.